Hi, my name is Diane Buglioli, and I'm the co-chairperson of the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee, which is a committee of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council. In my other hat, wearing my other hat, I'm also the Deputy Executive Director of a very special place, and I'm a former chairperson of the council. With me today are three people that I know very well, and let's, by way of introduction, let's hear all the different hats that you wear.
Hi, my name is Lorraine DeSantis. I'm the Executive Director of the Staten Island Center for Independent Living. I'm co-chair of the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee with Diane, and I am a parent of a man with autism, and I'm former chair of the council. Hello.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Rumolo. I'm also a former chair of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council. And I am the Director of Community Affairs and Support Services for Cerebral Palsey Association of New York State.
Hello, my name is Melissa Diacordo. I'm the Information Outreach Coordinator for the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council, as well as the Family Support Services Advisory Council.
Thank you. Well, welcome to everyone. Welcome to our audience, and welcome to us as the panel. This series of shows is being titled Willowbrook Revisited. And so it's the story of Willowbrook, the property, the people who live there, the people who work there, all the decisions that were made regarding the people who lived there, decisions that were made about the property, really the history, since colonial times up till present. But I think what's important is for us to be aware of all the transformations that happened all through that time, not only the transformations of how the property was being used, but the philosophy that was embraced by that property and the people on it. But I think for us to understand everything, I think you really need to understand how it began in terms of how did the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council become involved with the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee? Why did that committee occur? So let's start first by giving people an understanding of what the council is. Since we're all members of it, I'm a past chair as well. So Melissa, if you can bring us up to date in terms of what is the council today, and then we'll go back in history with it.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Okay.
The Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council was established in 1969. It's an association of self-advocates, family members, service providers. We work together in an effort to ensure the quality of life for Staten Islanders with special needs. And we do that by really providing a lot of relevant information to the self-advocates, to the families, to the service providers, and we also teach them a lot of advocacy skills. The Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council meets on a monthly basis. It's typically the third Friday of each month. This month we don't have our typical meeting, but we do have our annual community breakfast, which is taking place on February 27th. And within our council, we have 11 standing committees, which is wonderful for the community to know, because as you get involved with the council, there may be certain areas within the council that are more relevant to you in your life, whatever you're going through at the time. And with the council, for example, we have 11 standing committees. So if you're a new family with a younger child, maybe you want to start out with the Family Support Services Advisory Council, because you really want to learn about what supports and services exist and how to access those services. Then as that child starts to get older, they are approaching school age, we have an education committee. And again, as that child starts to grow, we have an adult services committee, and then we even have residential quality of life. We have several other committees as well, but it's good to really be informed of what exists, so you're not only part of the general meetings of the council, which are very informative and keep you up to date, but you're also provided with information that's relevant to your life currently. And there's open to self-advocates, there's open to family members, service providers within the community. And really, with the council, it's a good way to get first-hand information, especially now in New York State. We have a lot of changes going on. with the development of disabilities. So this is really the place to get all of that information. And you can access our information by going to our website, siddc.org. We currently have a Facebook page, which you can access as well, Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council, or you can call our office, 718-983-5276. We encourage families and self-advocates and service providers to really get involved, because it's all about being informed, and that information is going to empower you to really be an advocate for either yourself or for the individuals you love.
Yeah.
I want to add to that, the council is also a body that advises the governmental agencies, and we've done that over the years.
Yeah, actually, when the council first came into existence was back in the late 1960s, and it came about because of a mandate for the city to have input into the development of their services. So they had to have councils in each borough. And that's actually where it first came into existence, was back in, as you said, 1969, right? So,
and the council actually meets on the grounds of Willowbrook.
Right, at the Elizabeth Connolly Resource Center. And of course, for those people that don't know, Elizabeth Connolly was really a pioneer and wonderful advocate in our legislature. She was an assemblywoman here on Staten Island for many years, and really was the
champion for us.
Champion for us for so many years. Well, thank you. I mean, it really has such a wonderful array of opportunities for people to learn all different facets of what's happening on the island, both from the perspective of service providers and also from the perspective, probably more importantly, for the advocates, families, and individuals themselves who are self-advocates. So that's a wonderful thing. I know that you go out and you do different speaking engagements at the schools and PTAs and all different types of organizations. Yeah?
No, absolutely. It's all about really getting out into the community and doing the outreach and really helping families to understand what supports and services exist. And we're going to discuss that today, but with the whole Willowbrook property planning and revisiting Willowbrook, parents and families really need to understand our history, because we have come so far and have accomplished so much. But in order to keep moving forward and being able to be a strong advocate for your loved one or anyone with a disability in the community, you really need to know where their history came from.
Yeah, I mean, I know you have a perspective on that as well, Lorraine, in terms of each of us came to the committee for all different types of reasons. I think that outlines pretty much Melissa's, her wish to be a member of the committee So what is it for you, Lorraine?
Well, when the committee was formed, I was in line to be chairperson of the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Council, and also it's very important to me to preserve the memory of Willowbrook because of my son. My son was born in 1977 when Willowbrook was closing, and after the expose that Geraldo Rivera did on the news. And I met Geraldo recently. I had the opportunity to meet him, and I thanked him because, and I said, Mr. Rivera, if not for you and your expose, my son's services would look very different today. And it was important to me, and it remains important to me, to remind people and educate people so that we never go back to that time.
Yeah.
That was Willowbrook.
Yeah. Jackie?
Well, in my personal experience is, when I was a youngin', when I was starting out in my career, I actually was trying to be a teacher, and times were, a little rough, in the 70s. It was difficult to get a job in the, Board of Ed or, in any of the schools that were around. So I had an opportunity to actually go and work at Willowbrook for a summer as a teacher assistant. And when I arrived there and had my assignment, it was like I was struck by a lightning bolt. I said, that's it. This is where I need to be. This is where my services are needed. And from that moment on, that was it. I knew that I wanted to work there, and you know, it's been my career ever since.
Right. So obviously, and you were chairperson of the council, actually, of the time when we began the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee.
Right.
It was during your term.
It was approximately 10 years ago, and it was a time of, you know, I mean, we've gone through, you know, tumultuous times and, you know, and trying to always, you know, make sure we preserve our services. But it was at the time when there were factions that were looking to use the property. You know, there were, you know, ideas being thrown around and proposals to use the property for a variety of things, you know, from housing to dormitories to, you know, just meeting places, and use it for different things for the people in the community. But it was very, very important for us to preserve the legacy. So we had to fight to make sure, and we had to, you know, raise our voices, make sure our voices were heard, and, you know, we basically rallied to, you know, to show that we wanted this property to be preserved for, you know, people with developmental disabilities always. I mean, but to be, you know, the tenants that we use for our property planning committee.
That be inclusive, that it not be a property that is segregated only for people with developmental disabilities.
Right.
That it be an inclusive thing, that they are part of society, so society should also be represented on that property.
Exactly.
So, and much like
That was the
you,
spearhead,
much like you, I started working as a recreation worker for the state of New York. Because I didn't want to work in Manhattan and wear a dress to work every day. I started with my jeans working as a recreation worker at Willowbrook. And my life, I thought, was going in a different direction. And when I started there, I mean, that's where my career began, that I said, this is you don't say it to yourself, you know, this is where I want to be, but somehow your life just changes. And so the property has always been something that, you know, I had a passion about, because I felt that it's important that we remember how things can be and to not return there. But there are some wonderful other lessons that came from Willowbrook, and that's why we're calling it Willowbrook Revisited, because we want to take a look at the whole thing. It's a very textured and complex pieces of information and transformations and things that morphed. So we're doing a series of around 7 shows. So it's going to be really very, very interesting. And so I'd like to talk about the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee went through many phases. Because first, as you said, Jackie, we started with, well, what would we do with all the rest of this property? Because in the I believe it was in the 1980s, actually, when the Staten Island Developmental Disabilities Center closed. Let me just go back, because for people that aren't that,
80s,
for people who, you know, for people who aren't aware of all the different changes that happened, just in names. Back in 1969, when the council started, and when I began at Willowbrook, in 1969, it was called Willowbrook State School, and it was under the auspices of the Department of Mental Hygiene, which at that time, people with disabilities, it was a state department, right? And so they oversaw health, and all special services, people with psychiatric issues, people with substance abuse issues. All of those were underneath the Department of Mental Hygiene. As time changed, the Department for People with Disabilities was removed from underneath the Department of Mental Hygiene, and it became known as the Office Office of Mental Retardation and Developmental Disabilities. And at that time, Willowbrook State School changed to Willowbrook Developmental Center. Then a little bit later, OMRDD, this is more recent, became the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. So that's still the same state office, but it's OPWDD. Willowbrook changed from Willowbrook State School to Willowbrook Developmental Center to Staten Island Developmental Center and the Richmond Complex. So all of those different names still refer to that piece of property that all of us know on Staten Island, that is off Victory Boulevard, 2760 Victory Boulevard, but now is the home for the College of Staten Island, the Elizabeth Connolly Resource Center.
2 acres, I think.
And the Institute for Basic Research. Those 3 pieces of property, those 3 campuses, campuses comprised the former Willowbrook State School, which was 365 acres originally. So there's this, you know, this decades of decisions and changes, right? You have in the 1930s, the state decides to that they're going to build a facility for people with special needs. In the 1940s, the construction starts, and then the war begins, World War II. So they changed this campus and add a large building to a hospital building, and they call it Halloran Hospital. It's one of the largest military hospitals in our country. Then in the 50s, the war's over. They change it from the Veterans Administration back to Willowbrook State School, and it opens. In the 1960s, another building gets built, and that's solely for infants and young children, which is the first of its kind.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Even the architecture works for smaller people being in that building,
And
in those buildings.
Yeah, when you're on the ground, you can see the difference of the buildings that were built in the 40s, 30s, and 40s.
Right.
Those brick structures,
Right.
and then you see this more modern structure that is what was called the baby unit
with the main hallway and the classrooms.
in the classroom
all
settings.
off
Yeah.
the center.
In the 1970s, then, we have this expose that Lorraine talked about, the Geraldo Rivera expose. But interestingly enough, the first article was around 1969, and it was in the Staten Island Advance by Jane Curtin. And that was really the first article that came out. But then the expose came in the 70s. And following that was a big court case, federal court case, and we'll talk about that in our latest series.
Robert Kennedy.
Robert Kennedy visited it, called it a snake pit. There was some stuff in the New York Times about that. So
Right.
that, you know, all this courage is starting to happen, and that transformation is starting to occur in the 80s. The legislative group is started by the Secretary of General Services. I think his name was John Egan at the time. And they said, what are we going to do with these properties? Because we're going to close Willowbrook due to this court case with the federal government. And in 1987, Staten Island Developmental Center formally closes. And there's a decision made that the College of Staten Island will come to the properties. And I think in 1993, the first class is open for the college there. And in 2000, we start with the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee around 2000, 2002, around there, right?
No, it was probably a couple of years after that.
Yeah, yeah.
Or 2004, 2005.
2004,
A little bit
2005.
later,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
So, so those are the
Basically
the
sanctioned by
decades.
Commissioner Mall at the time.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
Thomas Mall.
Yeah, and we've
He was
had a
supportive
litany
of us
of
and-
commissioners, right,
Yes.
at the Office of Mental Retardation, and then the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, as it changes and changes and changes. And
Institute of Basic Research, too, cropped up. I don't know, was that also in the 60s?
yeah, we'd have to look at that specifically,
Right.
but it came up around that time. And of course, the Institute of Basic Research is this wonderful resource here on Staten Island. It's an internationally renowned organization that does research into many, many things, including
Fragile X syndrome.
Fragile X syndrome. They
autism,
work with autism as well as
They
the
do
connection
genetic
between
counseling as well.
Yes.
the connection between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's, which is very interesting, and
They have many clinical services, too.
yeah.
They do
Yes.
evaluations for some of the rare disorders that aren't seen
Yeah.
too often. So
Yes.
people come from far and wide to be evaluated.
Yeah, I
And
think
they're followed. Some of the babies that go
Yes.
there for evaluation are followed
Yes.
Yeah.
through their first years of development.
Yeah, as well with the Alzheimer's study, many individuals who have Down syndrome have been followed for at least that I know of, because they approached us at a very special place, and some families that wanted to be involved in that, they've been in it for, I think, at least 10 or 15 years now, that they've been studying with these people because of this link between the two. So there's so many different things that are going on Staten Island, and things that happen because of that property. And I think is really the focus of this Willowbrook Revisited thing, all the things that came about because of the expose. I mean, just the public law for education, the impact upon the
94,
educational
142.
94, 142 came about.
IDEA.
Yes.
Right? Now that
Yes.
comes in
Current.
in the 90s. That's something that comes in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
No, I'm
You
sorry,
know
in
a
the
lot
70s.
about that,
Right.
Melissa.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
in the 70s.
She does. She
Right.
knows a lot about the.
94, 142 comes in the 70s?
That was
Melissa?
1975.
Right, 75, so now the consent judgment is in 74. So we can see that, things are starting to transform because of some of the changes that are happening. And,
In the least restrictive environment.
right.
I
Most
think too,
important.
and a big focus of it is that whole integration piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer putting individuals with disabilities away so they're not seen by anyone or taught with their typically developing peers.
That segregation.
That segregation is no more, and now they're able to be integrated within their community. They're educated with their typically developing peers, and we all know there's a lot of research out there that states how important that is. So all of that is really a strong component of what Willowbrook has had really made today. What it is today was from that history.
Yeah.
It was a brand new thing for the New York City, Board of Education at the time in the 70s, and definitely new to the schools that people with severe disabilities, multiple disabilities, would be attending school programs. And they had to prepare for that, and that was
Prior to that,
groundbreaking.
prior to that time, before Willowbrook closed, the schools could say to families, we can't take your child, we can't manage, the child is too multiply handicapped, we can't. And so that was part of the reason why families felt forced to place their child in Willowbrook,
Yes,
because
they
there were no
encouraged
supports.
also by pediatricians at the time, because it was known that there were services there, because there were no services anywhere else, no services in the community. So it was felt that, well, at least there was an education department, there were probably therapies. I mean, that was,
That's
what
what-
was said.
yeah.
So, I mean, people followed that. Because they
I
thought
mean,
they would get
and
that.
that's going to be the topic of one of the sessions, will be the impact that Willowbrook had on the educational system. And so the history of deinstitutionalization we'll study. The transformation of the property itself from colonial times. We'll have someone from the archives, which is located at the College of Staten Island. Professor James Kaiser will be here. Hal Kennedy, who we all know, who's a member of council and a member of this committee, is a wonderful expert on Halloran Hospital, so we'll be talking about that. And so we will talk about the transformation of property. We'll talk about the transformation, actually the birth of the field, because prior to the consent judgment, there wasn't really a field of developmental disabilities. There wasn't even the word developmental disabilities. It was mental retardation, mental defectives. Going back in history to the segregation of people with special needs is really an extraordinary study in itself, because it really was based in a lot of segregation, separate them, because we're not really not sure about them. We're not sure. But we think we'll be safer if they're segregated. And that whole thing coming from asylums and all of that from history. We were fortunate, Lorraine and I went up to the the Disabilities Museum up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And that was also a wonderful area that was placed up there by People Inc. And it studied it through the Middle Ages and everything. It was a very
It was a wonderful experience to see all of that.
and they had their director up there was just wonderfully filled with all of the textures of the information, and it really gave you a sense of where we came from, as long ago as the Middle Ages, but just from the 1930s, people thought of things differently. They thought that
Even
people
the
didn't have the
categories
opportunities.
of, intellectual disability that were used and had to change. Took a very long time to change that.
So all of that changed. So it wasn't as though some mean people got together and created Willowbrook. At the time, it was the state of the art.
Yeah.
And there wasn't the sensitivity that society developed as it moved through this morphing that happened at Willowbrook. And that's why I think the Willowbrook property became so we've become so impassioned about it because we feel that this learning should not be lost. And I think all of us on council, we feel like we're the guardians of the message.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
And,
right, absolutely.
Right, so that this is why this series is really so important to us. I just I'm just happy to be involved in it and moving forward. You know, I'll just go over some of the things we talked about. First, we'd be talking about the actual transformation of the property. The second thing would be the history and sociology of Willowbrook State School with the two professors who just published a book, David Good and Darrell Hill. We'll talk about deinstitutionalization and a consent judgment. We're going to have a piece on those who live there and those who work there, who I think will bring a very interesting, you know, realism to it. That people, this is what people live through. Yeah, and then we're going to do something that I know is interest Lorraine is the family perspective on all of this, to get some families that were involved in this or had to make decisions around this. The effects on the educational system. 94-142 is a very big change. And last but not least is the today and the Willowbrook Mile, which is an accessible walking trail that is going to make its way through the three properties, the Institute of Basic Research, the Elizabeth Connolly Resource Center, and the College of Staten Island. It's a collaborative project, and it's going to have informational kiosks along the way to keep the message there. So, and that's something that we've all been involved in, and it's coming to fruition.
We're excited about it.
Finally, we're thrilled.
Yeah,
we
so
are.
And wonderfully, it's a collaborative thing with the College of Staten Island, and which is wonderful because it's part of their legacy in a way as well. This property that was segregated and you know, people's lives were stymied is now a progressive, inclusive learning institute being there. That's a wonderful transformation of that property. So,
with an excellent disability study.
yes, I'm glad you bring that up. And actually,
And that many
Lorraine, you just
people from
started
the council
something there.
actually teach there.
Yes, I'm teaching a social work course, a master's, second year master's level course. It is the social work program, and their focus is specifically on disabilities. So I'm so excited, and it's right on the grounds of Willowbrook. And I'm excited to be a part of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is just an introductory discussion of where it all sort of began, why we started the Willowbrook Property Planning Committee, to say we want to hold on to this property. We think it should have some focus still on people with disabilities.
And we like a good fight. Or at least I do.
Oh, so do I.
So this is just the introduction to this series, and I'm so thankful that all of you could be here today and bring your perspectives here. I think some of you will be visiting us back for the rest of the series. And I know for me, I'm just, the one thing I guess, you know, that I wonder now is, there were two people that I worked with very closely, a little boy named Josh, who I was there when he learned to walk, and a young girl, Dolores, that I helped her with some skills in terms of appropriate behaviors at times, and some verbal things. And I wonder now where they are and how they're doing. And I hope that through this series we'll have a real sense of the resilience of these people who lived through these times, and perhaps we can introduce to people that, along with the sadness and the regression that Willowbrook represents, that also there was this perseverance and this other side. So I think that should always be part of our story as we talk about it.
Absolutely.
Because people lived there, grew there, and they became other people. And we should also, I think, acknowledge their resilience in doing that, their
Absolutely.
perseverance.